NoSQL databases, also known as not only SQL. These are non-tabular databases that store data differently than relational databases, so different from SQL. If you're familiar with JSON or with XML, these are data that you can represent in a nested format. It's not necessarily something that you can readily represent in a tabular structure. We've seen an example of that if you go back to the COVID API request that we've made. The data that we received were actually represented as the region and all the districts or the counties within the region, and then all the cities within that region. And so we had to do a bit of a drilling down into the JSON data that we received. So here I am getting the data and I'm going into the regions, and then I'm getting the cities, or I think in that case should be counties here. But these are data I had to drill down to get to a level that is most suited for a tabular structure like that. However, not all data that you'll be working with would be readily available or readily representable in a tabular structure, which is why we need to use something like MongoDB in some cases. If you took the contemporary database class, you should already know how to work with Mongo and how to query Mongo. But if you don't, this is gonna be kind of enough for the most part for what you may need Mongo for. But if you're not, this demo here will just show you how you can connect to a Mongo database, but you're gonna need to use other resources to freshen up on what SQL or on how to query data from a Mongo database. I'll make sure that I post some of those resources in the course as well. Now, kind of similar to SQL, when we talked about it, we said that there are different dialects or different drivers that you may need to connect to the to different SQL dialects that you have. Mongo has something similar to it. It's not exactly like that, but it depends on where the Mongo database is hosted. You may need an additional driver or an extra package that you need to install when you download the main package that we'll be working with. So let me just actually start by creating a database on Atlas, which is the cloud provider that Mongo has. So if you go to cloud.mongodb.com, they do have options where you can create a free database, and that's basically what I'm gonna do right here. So I've already registered to create an account, so I'm gonna create or build a database. I'm gonna go with the free option. That's what I need this for right now. You get the option of selecting where you want your database to be hosted, whether it's in AWS or Azure or Google Cloud, and you can also choose the region where you want your data to be hosted. For most of your applications, you will want to make sure that your data is hosted somewhere within the United States, or again, depending on the project that you're working on and who your client is. And you get to choose here. Let me see, like if I go into Azure or AWS, so these are the locations of those databases. You generally want to pick one that is kind of closest to where you're at, unless you're building something that will be a global or a worldwide project here. So let me just choose the Virginia East 2. And I'm gonna create a cluster. Over here, you get to choose how you want to authenticate your connections. So what I'll do here is I'll do the username and password. So over here, let's say my username would be IT4063C, and I am gonna use whatever secure password that they can generate for me. Great, I'll copy that, and I'll actually paste it into the .env file that we talked about in a previous video. That way I have all my secure data, not in the code itself, but in a file that is kind of adjacent to the project, but I'm not really shipping it, or I'm not even pushing it to GitHub, for example. I'm actually not gonna create that user. It seems like I've already created a couple of users before. How would I like to connect? It looks like because I'm going to be using my local environment, I'm just going to need to whitelist my IP address with with cloud service here. So let me make sure that that is my most recent. Okay, yeah, all right. So my current IP address has already been added. I'll make sure that I blur this out in the video. All right, so I'm gonna finish and close. And congratulations on setting up your access roles. I'm gonna hide my quick starter. I do not really need that. But now that I am in the database cluster, I'm gonna need to create a database. So I'm gonna click on that. Oh, that's another cluster actually. So let me go back over here and I'm gonna choose the option to load sample database or dataset. I don't really have a lot of data that I can import, but they have this option where you can use some sample data for testing purposes. We've created a sample one, great. Now it's loading my database. Let's see if I can play around with the connect settings here while it's trying to load my data. So if I click on connect, and it doesn't really matter which option I'm gonna go with, I'm just looking for somewhere that can give me the connection string that I'm gonna need to use. So let me pick this one here. Actually, let me go back and choose application. I'm gonna choose Python as my driver. This is really the driver of PyMongo, which is the library that or the package that will be downloading to make our connection here. So here we have the Mongo connection. So this is the string that I'm gonna need to copy, and looks like the database have been established behind the scene. It's still trying to load all the sample data, but I can go back to my code and try to establish this connection right now. So let me go back to my notebook and I'm gonna install the PyMongo package here. So pip env install PyMongo. Now before I actually run that, let me show you something in the PyMongo documentation. This is where they're basically talking about the different dialects or the different options that you may need when establishing your connection. They basically are mentioning that if you're going to be using the MongoDB plus SRV protocol here, you're going to need this additional Python package called DNS Python, or if you download the package with the extra of SRV, that will get you all the packages that you need. There is also a different option here if you're using AWS. This is how you would, or this is the package that you'll need to download. So before I run this, I actually need to specify that I need the SRV extra here. Now that the PyMongo package is being installed, I'm gonna go over to my notebook and start making the connection. So from PyMongo, I'm gonna need to import my Mongo client. Here I made a typo. From PyMongo, import Mongo client. Now I'm gonna pause my video. I'm gonna go to the .env file and I'm gonna define some environment variables, which will be my username and password for this connection. I do not want to open the .env file now that it has my credentials for the Rapid API that we've done in a previous video. So I'll pause the video and I'll be back in a second. Alright, so I'm gonna import a couple of other packages. So import OS, and I'm also gonna import from .env or .env. I'm gonna import my load.env method. I'm gonna need to call this method first so that I can get the updated version of my .env file, which now contains my username and password. Let me make sure that I pass the override through over here. I'm gonna create my Mongo user that will be os.getEnv, and my variable name here was Mongo username, and I have another one for the password. Okay, great. Now I'm ready to make my connection using the Mongo client class here or function here. And here's my Mongo URI is gonna equal this right here. Notice I still need to replace the username and password, so I'm gonna need to do some string manipulation here, or concatenation or replacement to put my Mongo user and Mongo password into this string right here. So the way I'm gonna do this is I'm gonna replace this with the %s, same for the password, also %s, and over here you can do percentage, and then you provide a list of all the things that you need to replace those things by. So here's my Mongo user, and here's my Mongo password. That should automatically concatenate or replace the first the ampersand sign with Mongo user, and the second with Mongo password. I mean, also choose to do to actually pull out the Mongo host from that string. So I'll take that right here, and I'll replace that with another %s and replace it over. Now, this is generally just a code cleaning practice. Being able to replace those options without having to dig everywhere in your code and find what you need to replace is generally a better practice. So here I'm gonna need to make this Mongo host. All right, so now that I have my Mongo URI, the next thing is to create a Mongo client. So here my Mongo connection is gonna equal Mongo client, and here I need to provide my URI, so Mongo URI. Now this connection here is basically just a client connection. I still need to specify the particular database or the particular collection that I'm gonna be pulling data from before I can call my pandas data frame here. So let me go back to our database and see what databases and collections we have. So it looks like I have a database called Sample Airbnb, and it has a single collection of listings and reviews. There's another database of Sample Analytics, and that has 3 different collections: accounts, customers, and transactions. You can choose whichever one you want to explore, and so I'm just gonna use the Airbnb database for now. So over here, I'm gonna go back to my code, and I'm gonna make my connection very particular here. So I'm gonna specify the database that I'm gonna be working in this connection, and so I will pass Sample Airbnb as my database name. I could go as far as also specifying the collection, but I don't think it makes sense in this particular context here. Alright, so next thing I'm gonna need to do is to import pandas. So import pandas as PD. Now I'm ready to query data from this Mongo connection and store that into a pandas data frame. So here my Mongo data, or let me just call it reviews, is gonna equal my Mongo connection, and I need to specify the collection that I'm pulling this data from. So if I'll go back here. It was called listings and reviews. Let me just copy it so I don't make any typos. Here we go. And I can call the find function, and I can provide a particular query. If you're familiar with Mongo and how you can query data from Mongo, you can pass whatever options you want into this object here, or you can just leave it blank right now. Once you have the reviews, you're gonna need to create a reviews data frame, and that will equal PD data frame, and I'm gonna provide those reviews as a list. And if I pull the head of this data frame here, here's what we get. Let's see. Looks like it's a big database. Alright, here we go. So it looks like I got a bunch of listings. Every listing has a URL, a name, a summary, some description. What else? Looks like there are a bunch of columns that were truncated here, so we're gonna need to figure out how we can get those out. There's a column for how many guests you could have. There are another column which looks like it's not really a column per se, it's another object of all the images that that were associated with this particular listing. And there are some reviews and review scores. Also, they seem to be another JSON object that you need to parse or dig deeper into. So again, it's not exactly a tabular data structure. It's a more flexible data structure that developers generally like to work with. Now let's just figure out how we can display all the other columns here. So I'm gonna go up here and I'm gonna change the PD set option display max columns to none. That way it does not truncate any of the columns that we have in the data frame here. So let me run this one more time. And it's gonna take another 18 seconds. All right, so here's our data frame. Looks like we were, the stuff that we're taking out are the interactions, house rules, bed types, minimum nights, maximum nights, cancellation policy, how many people they can accommodate, how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, and all of that kind of information. So these were pretty important to know that they existed in our data set. Let me show you how I actually can run some Mongo, a very simple Mongo query here. Let's say I'm trying to pull all the reviews where they only had 3 bedrooms and below. I don't want any of the 5s, the 6s, and so on. So what I'll do here in my find query object, I'm gonna say for my bedrooms property, I want to only get records where it's less than 5. This may look a little bit weird. It's not the most common way to indicate less than or greater than, but this is the query language that you'd work with if you're using Mongo. So less than 3 is what I'm looking for. Hopefully I've done this right. So let's run this cell one more time and see what do we get. All right, so it actually took a little bit slightly less time because it did some filtering. Let's see how many bedrooms do we have here. And we have a single bedroom. Okay, all of these are ones, and I only really queried or presented 5. If I do 10, I may actually, let me do this in a different cell so I don't have to re-query all the data again. Here we go. Looks like there's a 2 over here, there's a 0 for somehow, but it looks like that connection worked correctly. So let's recap what we've done here. For a Mongo database connection, first thing I showed you how to create a database on cloud.mongodb. We've used their sample databases just so we can quickly demo how we can make a connection. Then I used the PyMongo package and I had to install the extra of the SRV, and we did that by running pip env install pymongo and then the name of the extra that we need to download. Because these are some secret information that I did not want to show you on the screen, I had to put those in my .env file, and I used the .env or .env load.env function to pull this data from the .env file and treat it as if it was defined at the operating system level. And then I got those secrets by their name using the getEnv function, created my URI, created my connection, and then I ran my query, and whatever results I got from that, I put it in a data frame. But that's all we have for Mongo connections here.